Hey folks, how's it going? This is tax history. I am going to be looking at taxes throughout history. Speaking as a tax lawyer, this is something that I find interesting. I'm also a big fan of learning about history, so I hope that you find it enjoyable as well. I'm going to look particular at a few criteria, a few characteristics of different taxes, and sort of give you my opinion slash historical consensus on a few different factors for every tax. How can we evaluate them? I'm going to look at whether they are enforceable, predictable, equitable, reliable, and simple. Maybe a few other factors as well. But generally speaking, all taxes throughout history, we can sort of evaluate them based on criteria like that. I originally wrote this as a presentation for work colleagues, a continuing legal education. But I think I can make this a little more fun, a little less technical, because you're not trying to watch this just for legal education. But I already did the work, and I want to continue to expand what I've already done. So just a little note here, this is the introductory video. I'm going to break it up into shorter videos, make it a little bit easier to watch, because there's a lot of material. I don't want to go on too long, but it really would be better if I could break it up. But just for this introduction, I do want to give a quick note on what is a tax. I'm not going to be too rigid about the definition. It could mean a lot of different things, but ultimately it is a taking of value that is compulsory, without exchange, that is non-penal, and generally it should be systematic. Typically it will be by the government or someone authorized by the government, and typically it will be for the government or for government purposes. Now, a lot of those things are really, there are some flexible boundaries, so it can be difficult. Sometimes it's a judgment call whether we call something a tax or not. But the compulsory taking of value without exchange, that is not for punishment, basically it's not a criminal penalty, and without exchange means it's not tuition like to a state school, for example. It's not even meant to be a fee, such as for a government license, although that can be very negotiable. But really what we're saying is somebody took something from you, usually money, but not necessarily, and they were not trying to trade with you directly. Maybe indirectly they offered you the government's protection, maybe indirectly they offered you other government services. But if they're just selling you something, that's more of a price. They're exchanging something of value with you directly, one for one, tit for tat. That is generally not called a tax, or it's further from a tax. So that's just sort of the boundaries. I'm trying to set down that I'd like to see a more expansive definition of tax just for these purposes, because there are a lot of things that operate like taxes and that we can evaluate like a tax, but it's not cash, it's not paying gold coins to the king, and it's not filling out a 1040 to the IRS. So I want to include those, including labor taxes, conscription, corvée, but all sorts of medieval taxes, ancient taxes, things like that. I'd like to keep a general definition, so I'm putting that in this introduction so that you sort of understand. I'm trying to go big here. Now, I don't want to hit any of them too in-depth right now. They're going to have their own videos, but I'd just like to give you a little flavor about where I want to go. Just some examples of some of the taxes that I'm looking at. There's the Doomsday Book from medieval England, right, where essentially a large census for tax purposes of England in the 11th century, where they counted things, the people, they counted tax duties, they counted all sorts of things, including down to the number of eels that were collected by a local river mill, or a hawk eyrie, or a honeybee apiary, so things like that. Very, very interesting, and ultimately that's a tax document. So I'd like to spend some time talking about that. I'd like to talk about the Hearth Tax, which is also from the United Kingdom, from England in particular, where that was a few hundred years later. That was in the late 17th century, and they would go into your home and they'd count your fireplaces and tax you based on them. Pretty interesting tax. It's got a lot of implications. Wasn't around very long, but there's a lot of meat to a relatively brief, unpopular tax called the Hearth Tax. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Greek income tax and their difficulties with enforcing taxes, including secret Athens swimming pools and what tax enforcement can look like in the modern world, in particular with Google Earth. And I'll probably also talk about the Stamp Act, right? This, if you are familiar with the American Revolution, that's something that we should all be generally aware of. They tried to tax, with Stamp Act, papers, licenses, even playing cards. So very interesting to American history, and therefore has an impact on world history, but also interesting in tax history terms. So those are just that's a little flavor of where this is going to go, and I hope you find it interesting.